The professor laughed, loud enough for the whole lecture hall to hear. You? Solve this calculus equation? 40 students stared, as Noah, the only black freshman, stood frozen, chalk in hand, humiliated before he even touched the board. Cameras were already rolling, but what no one knew was that formula wasn't just math. It was a message from his mother's grave, and what he wrote next, it would burn the university to the ground. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The halls of Belmont University whispered of old money and older traditions. Ivy-covered walls stretched over a century of legacies, most carved from the same mold, white, affluent, protected. Noah Darnell knew it the moment he stepped foot on campus, not by what was said, but by what wasn't. The way faculty eyes trailed him just a second longer than necessary. The way students pulled their bags closer in the library, not out of fear but unfamiliarity. And now, walking into advanced calculus I, that same silence echoed louder than ever. The classroom itself resembled a lecture hall meant for prestige. Slate blackboards, dim amber lighting, and mahogany-trimmed desks, forming neat, hierarchical rows. 40 students, none of whom looked like Noah, filtered in, sliding MacBooks open, sharing smirks, elbowing familiar legacies. Brandon Keswick sat near the front. His family had donated the newest science wing, and his entourage clustered around him, all white, all confident, all comfortable. Noah, with his thrifted hoodie and wide, alert eyes, chose a seat near the, not because he wanted to hide, but because he needed to see everyone. At precisely 10:01 a.m., the classroom door creaked open, and Professor Emmett Harrow entered like a storm in slow motion. His gait was measured, hands clasped behind his back, face sculpted in stone. His reputation preceded him, a mathematical savant turned cynical gatekeeper. Harrow was brilliant, no doubt, but feared more for what he believed than what he taught. He didn't hide his disdain for diversity hires, or what he called performance students. His lectures, they said, weren't just about numbers, they were about sorting wheat from chaff, and he was always quick to decide who was who. Without a word, Harrow turned to the board and scrawled a problem. A deceptively simple differential equation, but one that required layers of logical leaps. The kind of problem that gauged, not just intelligence, but intuition. The room fell into a hush. Eyes darted, fingers hesitated over keyboards. No one moved, until Noah raised his hand. It wasn't pride that lifted his arm, it was instinct. He recognized the equation immediately. Not because it had been taught, but because it echoed something deeper. Something his mother used to hum under her breath, while scribbling on paper scraps in their tiny apartment kitchen. She had been a mathematician at heart, if not in degree. Years of being told she wasn't the right fit had buried her talent beneath layers of overwork and rejection. But at night, in whispers, she passed it to Noah like a secret heirloom. And now it was asking to be used. Professor Harrow turned slowly. He saw the hand, then the face. His expression barely shifted, but the room felt the change. A moment stretched unnaturally long. You? Harrow said, almost gently. Then came the chuckle. Low at first, then growing louder, crueler. You? Solve this? The class broke into uneasy laughter. Some forced, others genuinely amused. Noah's hand lowered halfway. His throat tightened, shame, sharp and immediate, clawed at his chest. But then, something flickered. A pressure not just from outside, but inside. A burning reminder of why he was here, why he couldn't afford to fold. He stood up. Come on down then, Harrow said, stepping aside with mock courtesy. Let's see what affirmative action gets us these days. The silence returned, heavier now. Every eye followed Noah as he walked the long path to the front of the class. He felt them scanning him, dissecting him, waiting to confirm their suspicions, that he didn't belong, that he was only here to fail. As he reached the board, Noah's fingers briefly trembled. He gripped the chalk like it was heavier than it should have been. Behind him, Harrow folded his arms, his smirk widening. Brandon whispered something to the girl beside him, and she laughed under her breath. Somewhere near the back, a phone clicked. Someone recording. But then Noah paused. He inhaled once, deeply, and exhaled. Slowly, the tension began to shift. The equation wasn't abstract anymore. It was his mother's handwriting, faded in a notebook filled with dreams and rejections. It was the rhythm of her voice, patient and precise, even after her third 12-hour shift. It was the smell of burnt toast and cold coffee, of love wrapped in disappointment. He picked up the chalk with steady hands and began to write, not just solving, but translating, mapping a story only he could tell. He didn't just move left to right. He looped the solution around a boundary condition Harrow hadn't anticipated. He didn't hesitate at the integration step. He leapt through it, confident. Every line he wrote cut deeper into the silence. And as the final expression took form, a strange thing happened. No one laughed. Harrow, who had been leaning against the podium, now stood upright. His eyes narrowed, not in triumph, but disbelief. He stepped closer, scanning the work, red pen in hand. For a second, it looked like he might speak. But he did. He simply stared at the final answer, then at the steps that led to it. And for a fleeting moment, just before Harrow could reach the board, Noah turned around. His face wasn't smug. It wasn't triumphant. It was something else. Calm, determined, and tired. Tired of having to prove what others were allowed to assume. Tired of having to carry generations of erased potential. Tired of this. The student stared back, unsure of how to react. Brandon's smirk had faltered. The girl beside him blinked, uncertain. Noah placed the chalk down, hands no longer trembling. And before Harrow could say a word, a faint beep echoed from someone's phone. Then another. Then several. Students glanced down and saw what had just been uploaded. A 15-second clip, already gaining traction on student group chats. Harrow's laugh. His mocking tone. You? Solve this? With Noah's quiet, brutal solution as the context. They hadn't just watched a student solve a problem. They had watched a professor bet on failure and lose. As Noah made his way back to his seat, a student whispered, "Check your phone." He glanced down and his breath caught. A headline flashed across his screen. Black student exposes racist professor in real time. This clip is wild. But the caption underneath said something else. Something he didn't write. He couldn't even explain his own answer. The lie had already begun. As Noah made his way back to his seat, the silence in the classroom hung heavier than applause. It wasn't respect. It was recalibration. Dozens of students who had dismissed him just minutes earlier now quietly questioned what they had just witnessed. Professor Harrow stood stiffly by the board, staring at the chalk marks that dismantled not just an equation, but his authority. He didn't erase the board. He didn't offer praise. He simply turned to his desk, clicked open his laptop, and began the lecture as if nothing had happened. But the undercurrent had shifted, and Noah felt it. Not admiration, suspicion. Noah sat down, heart still pounding, unsure if what he felt was victory or the warning of something deeper. He opened his notebook, half listening, but a flicker of movement caught his eye. Brandon Keswick, 2 rows ahead, had leaned into his friend Jackson's ear. The two exchanged a grin, and Jackson pulled out his phone. A soft chuckle followed. Then another, and another. Whispered comments floated like smoke through the room. Let's see how long the genius lasts. Probably got the answer off TikTok. That he's already on academic probation. It was the sound of shifting focus, not on the equation, but on Noah himself. Unknown to Noah, while he stood at the board, Brandon had quietly angled his phone and hit record. But he hadn't captured the solution, just the laughter, the professor's taunt, and Noah's hesitation. With a few quick edits, Brandon cut the footage to make it look like Noah had stumbled through the problem, mumbling nonsense while the class cringed. It was already being exported to his group chat, under a snarky title, "When Affirmative Action Gets Too Confident," and it wasn't going to stay in the group chat for long. What started as a humiliation turned upside down, now threatened to flip again. Not because of truth, but manipulation. The seed had been planted. If Noah was capable of solving that equation, he had to have cheated. That was the only narrative they could believe. The alternative, that he was legitimately brilliant, didn't align with their understanding of how things worked. After class, as students shuffled out, Brandon hung back just enough to be noticed. "Nice work, man," he said, voice smooth with insincerity. "Didn't expect that from you. You tutor or something." It wasn't a question. It was bait. Noah looked up but said nothing. He didn't owe this guy anything, especially not an explanation. Brandon tilted his head, smile tight. "I mean, don't take it the wrong way. You surprised a lot of people, that's all." Noah slung his bag over his shoulder, his gaze level. "Maybe they should stop expecting so little." Brandon's smile twitched. Behind him, Jackson gave a low whistle. "Toche," he muttered. But the exchange wasn't over. Not really. By nightfall, the video had made its way to a private Reddit thread, hosted by Belmont students. Mostly white, mostly anonymous. It spread faster than expected. Brandon's caption, "Watch the prof call him out. This is brutal," lit the fuse. The thread filled with comments. "Yikes. This is what happens when you lower the bar. Can't make this stuff up." A few voices pushed back, saying the clip looked edited. They were drowned out. The lie was more entertaining than the truth. Noah, meanwhile, was in the student commons reviewing his notes with headphones on. He hadn't looked at his phone since class. He didn't know about the video. He didn't know about the comment flood. He didn't know his name had just been mentioned by a rising right-wing influencer on X, formerly Twitter, who quote-tweeted the clip with the words, "Diversity hire gets exposed in real time." Sad to watch, by the time Noah walked back to his dorm, a heavy drizzle began to fall. He didn't mind the rain. It blurred the world just enough to make it quiet. He climbed the stairs to his floor, his keycard scanning green, and pushed open the door to his small single. A stack of unopened emails waited on his laptop. One from his calculus TA, another from a professor he hadn't even met yet. And then came the message from a friend back home. "Yo, you seeing this? They're coming for you, bro." Followed by a link. He clicked it and froze. There he was, on screen, standing at the board, but not solving, just hesitating. Harrow's voice loud and clear. "You? Solve this?" The class laughing. The clip cut right before the chalk hit the board, and underneath, the title, "Affirmative Action Genius Humiliates Himself." Over 80,000 views in 6 hours. His heart thudded, slow and heavy. His jaw tightened. His breath became shallow. The comment section was a nightmare. "Looks like he forgot to Google the answer. This is what they're sending to Ivy Leagues now?" I bet he couldn't even spell calculus. It wasn't just a hit to his ego. It was a gut punch to everything he carried. His mother's sacrifices, his sleepless nights, his full ride, his place in that room. One video, edited and framed just right, had turned his quiet win into a national spectacle of failure. And worse, it was spreading fast. He opened his inbox again. This time, there were 3 new emails. One from the Office of Academic Integrity. The subject line made his stomach drop. "Preliminary inquiry regarding academic misconduct. Immediate attention required." Noah stood up. The room spun slightly. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady himself. His phone buzzed again. A voicemail, from his mentor, Dr. Leah Corbin, the only black tenured professor in the entire math department. "Noah," her voice said, calm but urgent. "I just saw the clip. Call me. Don't say anything to anyone else yet. This is bigger than it looks." He pressed the phone to his forehead. Eyes shut. He could feel the walls closing in. The victory had been brief. The backlash, relentless. Outside, thunder cracked, distant but ominous. He turned toward his window, just as a shadow passed across it. Someone moving in the hallway, slow and deliberate. A knock followed. 3 taps, soft, then silence. He opened the door to find a plain envelope on the floor. No name, no return address. He picked it up, opened it slowly, and pulled out a printed screenshot of the video. But someone had circled the title in red ink, and beneath it, a handwritten message in jagged print. "You're next." Noah staggered back, holding the note, just as his phone lit up again. A new push notification. Fox News Tonight. College student goes viral for faking math skills. Academic fraud. And beneath that, a text from an unknown number. "Check your scholarship status." Clock's ticking. The storm didn't come with lightning. It came with likes, retweets, and thinly veiled hate, wrapped in smug commentary. Noah had always known that truth moved slower than outrage, but he hadn't expected it to be buried completely. Within 12 hours of the doctored video spreading online, his name was trending. Not in celebration, not in recognition, but as a punchline. A warning. A scapegoat in a national conversation he never asked to be part of. It wasn't just student whispers anymore. Now conservative media figures were quoting the clip, framing it as proof that elite institutions had sacrificed excellence for diversity optics. One particular influencer, a former hedge fund analyst turned online provocateur, tweeted the video with the caption, "This is what happens when we prioritize skin color over skill. Belmont University should be ashamed." The tweet had 90,000 likes and counting. Comments flooded in. Some mocked Noah's supposed stammer. Others accused him of riding a racial quota. Most didn't even know his name, just his face and the lie built around it. But Belmont students knew his name, and they used it freely. Noah's student email began overflowing, not with support but venom. Racial slurs typed with gleeful precision. Accusations that he had embarrassed the university. One email ended with, "Go back to wherever you scammed your way in from." Another read, "You're not fooling anyone. We see what you are." Inside his dorm room, Noah scrolled through the growing chaos, his hands numb. The walls seemed closer now, the air too thin. His laptop chimed again, this time with an official notice from the Board of Academic Integrity. The subject line said everything: preliminary inquiry, allegation of academic misconduct, case ID. He clicked it open with shaky fingers. The language was dry, clinical, but the accusation wasn't. Following a public video involving classroom activity and subsequent reports from multiple students, the letter began. The board has initiated a formal inquiry into possible academic dishonesty, including unauthorized collaboration, misrepresentation of academic ability, and violation of the university's honor code. He didn't know what stung worse, the accusation itself, or the knowledge that no one in authority had asked for his version first. He sat back, exhaling through clenched teeth. The silence in his room was now unbearable. He looked around, searching for something, anything that could anchor him. His mother's journal sat on the bookshelf, untouched since he left for campus. Inside it, notes, equations, and the scribbled dreams of a woman whose brilliance had been drowned by decades of quiet racism. She had wanted so badly for her son to walk into rooms she had been locked out of, and now, those same rooms were turning on him with sharpened claws. His phone buzzed again. An anonymous text this time. "We know what you did to get into this school, and we're coming for your scholarship next." Noah stared at the screen, frozen. The words felt surgical, not just threatening, but calculated. Whoever was behind this wasn't satisfied with embarrassment. They wanted erasure. And then the emails began shifting in tone. Not just students anymore. Alumni, donors, and angry strangers from across the country. One email, clearly from a Belmont alum, threatened to pull their donation unless disciplinary action was taken. Another said Noah was an example of everything wrong with academia. A third linked to a blog that had compiled screenshots of Noah's social media history. Pictures of his high school graduation, posts celebrating his mother's life, even a photo of him volunteering at a local STEM camp for black kids. The blog's headline read, "Activist, not academic." Beneath it, "His grades are a lie, his story is a script, and his presence is an insult to real students." He wasn't just being painted as a fraud. He was being dehumanized. By midday, Noah's professor in another class, Dr. Herschel, sent a short, awkwardly worded email postponing their upcoming advising meeting. In light of recent developments, it read, "We'll reschedule once the inquiry concludes." No offer of support, no attempt at clarification, just distance. As if even being near Noah now could be professionally dangerous. Alina Whitmore, the graduate assistant from the library, who had briefly helped him with calculus references weeks earlier, sent him a DM that broke the pattern. "I know what they're doing. It's not the first time. Let me know if you need someone to talk to." Seriously, it was the only message that didn't drip with poison. Noah didn't respond. Not yet. He was still stuck in the spiral. Every step forward felt like walking through molasses. He clicked through the news. One outlet ran the headline, "Did Belmont student cheat his way to academic fame?" Another published a think piece, "The new face of mediocrity in the Ivy League." The language was coded, but the meaning was loud. He was being crucified not for what he had done, but for what he represented. He tried to call Dr. Leah Corbin, but it went straight to voicemail. She was probably being flooded too. Maybe she was under pressure to stay out of it. Maybe she was being warned. Later that evening, Belmont's official social media account posted a statement that only deepened the wound. "We are aware of the video circulating online, and are reviewing the matter internally. Belmont University is committed to upholding the highest standards of academic excellence and integrity for all students." For all students. The words felt hollow, sterile, and intentionally vague. Not a single mention of Noah's name. Not a single effort to refute the growing narrative. They were letting him burn in public without even offering a glass of water. As night fell, Noah sat by the window, the city beyond flickering in a haze of neon and fog. He felt cracked open, exposed. His body was tired, but sleep was unreachable. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Harrow's voice. "You? Solve this?" The laugh, the room's chuckles, and now the noise of thousands of strangers mocking him for a crime he never committed. The worst part wasn't the lies. It was the fact that so many were ready to believe them. He opened his laptop again, unsure what he was looking for. Maybe something to prove he wasn't alone. Maybe just to see if the story would change. But instead a new email appeared. No subject, no sender name, just a string of numbers as the address. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single line. "They've opened your admissions file." His chest tightened. He reread the message again and again. It didn't make sense at first, until it did. They weren't just going after the video. They were going after the foundation. His scholarship, his SAT scores, his application essay, anything they could poke a hole in. The implication was clear. They were going to frame his entire presence at Belmont as illegitimate. He closed the laptop, but before he could move, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a screenshot. Someone had posted on an anonymous campus confession page. "Everyone knows he only got in because of that community outreach essay. Heard he cried about his dead mom for 3 pages. Real merit, huh?" The words hit like glass. For a moment, the silence in the room was suffocating. Then a knock came at the door. Not loud, not threatening, just slow, deliberate, like whoever was behind it didn't need to force anything. They already knew he was cornered. He stood still, watching the doorknob, listening. A piece of paper slid under the door. He walked over, picked it up, and unfolded it. A photo, a grainy printout of his mother's grave, and scrawled beneath it in red marker, "She'd be so proud of how you lied your way here." Noah dropped the photo, his fingers trembling. Just as his phone rang, "Unknown number." He answered. A distorted voice on the other end whispered, "Say goodbye to your funding. The review board meets tomorrow." Noah didn't sleep that night. The photo of his mother's grave sat crumpled on his desk, next to the still open email that warned his admissions file was under scrutiny. The anonymous phone call replayed in his head like static, the voice distorted but the message razor sharp. "Say goodbye to your funding." That threat wasn't empty. It felt premeditated, like someone wasn't just trying to ruin him, they were following a plan. By morning, the mask of the university was still intact, but Noah had started to see the cracks. Every glance in the hallway felt longer, more loaded. Professors passed by without acknowledgement. Students whispered in clusters, heads turning as he walked by. He kept his headphones on but didn't play music. The silence let him listen, and in the silence he began to hear the machine beneath the surface. His first glimpse came in the form of a clerical update email forwarded to him by accident. It was short, meant for internal staff only, but the body referenced a coded track marker, Tier D status, under review. Noah didn't recognize the term, but something about the phrasing felt familiar. Sanitized language, bureaucratic distance. It didn't say targeted, it said Tier D. That was the language of exclusion, hidden in plain sight. When he asked his academic advisor, Dr. Herschel, about it, the man's face tightened. "It's just part of our internal classification system," he said, voice clipped. "Nothing that impacts you directly." "But what is it based on?" Noah asked. "Multiple factors. GPA, behavioral notes, enrollment pathway. It's complex, but I've never had a behavioral issue," Noah replied. "And my GPA is Dr. Herschel gave a thin smile. "Sometimes things don't show up on paper. Just focus on your work, Mr. Darnell." The words weren't a suggestion. They were a warning. That same day, Noah reached out to Elena Whitmore. Her message had been the only human connection in days. They met in a quiet corner of the campus archives building, where she was assisting a professor with digitizing old academic records. She didn't ask how he was. She knew. "There's a code," she said without preamble. "I've seen it in the admin logs. Students like you don't get flagged because of grades. You get flagged for being disruptive to the culture." "What culture?" Noah asked, though he already knew the answer. "The one that wasn't built for you to be in the room." Elena explained what she'd seen during her time working behind the scenes. An unofficial but consistent pattern. Black students, particularly those not from prep school pipelines, were far more likely to be placed under Tier D status. A label that justified extra scrutiny, limited access to certain advisors, and made it easier to trigger disciplinary reviews. It wasn't a policy, it was an understanding. A handshake in the dark. Noah sat back, stunned. So they create a system that punishes you for not fitting the mold, and then punish you again for trying to succeed in it. Elena nodded. "And if you push back, they call it aggression." As she spoke, pieces began falling into place. His freshman orientation advisor, the one who had steered him away from advanced placement courses, the lost recommendation for the research program he had applied to, the faculty mixer he had been accidentally left off the invite list for. These weren't coincidences. They were mechanisms, and at the center of it all was Professor Harrow, Elena leaned in. I heard something last week. Harrow met with Brandon in private after your first calculus class. Of course he did, Noah said. The video, it wasn't just Brandon's idea. No, she said. It never is. But that wasn't enough. Noah needed to see it for himself. Proof that the conspiracy wasn't just emotional paranoia, but institutional practice. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Late one evening, Elena texted, "Faculty lounge access open during janitorial rounds. 11:15. Be careful." Noah slipped out of his dorm with a hoodie over his head, careful to avoid cameras. The faculty building was mostly dark, except for the glow of vending machines and soft lamplight inside offices. The lounge was on the second floor, a restricted area marked with a small plaque that read faculty and administrative use only. But tonight the door was unlocked, the cleaning staff having propped it open while moving supplies. Inside, the space was sterile and cold. Glass table, leather chairs, academic journals stacked neatly. But in the far corner was what he came for, a wall-mounted file cabinet and console computer, logged into the internal faculty system. He moved quickly, navigating tabs, filtering keywords, Tier D, academic inquiry, Darnell, Noah. Each search returned pages of coded memos, metadata logs, and flagged notes. One entry stopped him cold. Flag, Darnell N. High visibility risk. Note, may require preemptive mitigation. Coordinate W calc depth. He kept scrolling. Another note, associate with external advocacy profiles. Monitor for PR complications. Trigger point, viral incident. Noah's fingers trembled. They weren't reacting to the video. They had anticipated it. His presence at Belmont had been tolerated, until he proved he didn't need their permission to be great. Voices echoed from the hallway. Footsteps. Noah ducked behind a chair. Heart hammering. Through the frosted window in the door, he saw two figures approaching. One tall, rigid, the other shorter, broader. As they stepped inside, Noah's breath caught. It was Professor Harrow and Brandon. They didn't notice him in the dark corner, obscured by the edge of the coffee bar. Harrow poured himself tea while Brandon slouched into a chair, his confidence radiating off him. Harrow's voice was low, but sharp. The inquiry is a formality. The goal is attrition. Brandon smirked. So he's really out? Not yet. But he won't last the semester. We'll make sure of it. Noah froze. He knew what was happening now. This wasn't about academic dishonesty. It was about engineering failure. Piece by piece they were constructing a collapse. But what if he pushes back? Brandon asked. Harrow scoffed. Then we let the system do what it was designed to do. Make the pressure unbearable. Let him implode. That's how we maintain the standard. There was no shame, no concern, just precision. The two men sat a while longer, discussing grades, committee votes, and how to justify what was already in motion. Harrow spoke of Noah not as a student, but as a problem to be solved. A stain to be washed out. A miscalculation in their perfect equation. Noah stayed perfectly still, rage building in his chest like fire pressed beneath glass. He had suspected they were working against him. But now he knew it wasn't just prejudice. It was policy. As the conversation ended, Harrow stood, gathering his papers. Schedule the next narrative leak for Friday. Something about grade inflation. He'll take the bait. Brandon chuckled. He always does. They left the room without noticing the shadow left behind. Noah waited a full minute before stepping out from the corner. His hands were cold, but his jaw was set. He wasn't going to run. Not anymore. He copied what he could from the screen onto his phone. Screenshots, dates, flags, evidence. But as he turned to leave, the faculty printer behind the desk whirred to life. Unexpectedly. One page. Just one. He stepped toward it, confused. The sheet slid out, warm and sharp-smelling. At the top it read, Confidential Student Psych Profile. Noah Darnell. Flagged. Emotional fragility. Risk of public breakdown. His photo was printed at the corner. Below it, one sentence stood out, highlighted. Most effective strategy: isolate and discredit. Noah backed away, heart pounding, when suddenly the printer beeped again. Another document queued. But this time it wasn't about him. It was about someone else. Someone unexpected. Elena Whitmore. Risk of alliance escalation. Noah left Belmont without telling anyone. No emails. No texts. No advisor consultations. He packed a single bag at dawn, walked straight past the dorm security desk with his hood up, and boarded the earliest bus back to Lexington, the one place where the air still felt real. He didn't need anyone's permission to disappear for the weekend. What he needed was space. Not just to breathe, but to remember who he was before Belmont twisted him into something fragile and watchful. The ride south was long and quiet, the kind of quiet that made memories louder. With each mile, the weight of campus politics, the surveillance, the leaks, the betrayal, all of it seemed to peel off, layer by layer, until only one truth remained. His mother. Her name was Charlene Darnell. She had raised him in a one-bedroom apartment 2 blocks from the highway, surrounded by faded chain-link fences and train horns that never stopped screaming at night. She was never rich, but she had been rich in thought. She saw the world in patterns, not just in people, but in numbers. When Noah was a boy, she used to line the walls with butcher paper and write equations on them, explaining abstract calculus to him like it was bedtime poetry. But the world had not made room for her gift. Charlene had once been a top student at Pinwood State, a historically black college with limited funding and even more limited patience for women who challenged the system. Her thesis on nonlinear boundary structures in complex systems had been dismissed as unfocused by a white tenured professor who refused to meet with her more than once. When she tried to re-enroll after taking time off for Noah's birth, they told her the program had shifted focus and that her previous credits didn't align. Eventually, she gave up the fight, but not the math. When he stepped into their old apartment, the floorboards creaked in familiar ways. His aunt had kept the place intact after Charlene passed 2 years ago from complications after a stroke. Noah rarely visited anymore. The silence here was too close, too personal. But now it was the only place left that hadn't been corrupted by Belmont's cold eyes and calculated files. He didn't sleep that night. He wandered room to room, letting his fingers trail across furniture worn by years of love and exhaustion. Her scent was long gone, but her presence still lived in the objects she left behind. A chipped coffee mug with pie printed in faded blue, a stack of old graphing papers tucked under the microwave, and the velvet shoebox that once held her dreams. He found the journal near dawn, buried at the bottom of a broken drawer, inside a canvas bag labeled "Do Not Throw Away." It was leather-bound, heavy and pulsing with quiet urgency. Noah held it for several minutes before opening it, afraid of what he might find, and even more afraid of what he wouldn't. Inside, her handwriting greeted him like a whisper. Sharp, slanted, deliberate. Page after page of formulas stretched across the yellowed paper, interwoven with thoughts, questions, and fragments of pain disguised as theory. She hadn't just written equations, she bled them. And in between proofs, she wrote stories. I wonder how many women like me disappear from mathematics every year. Not because we're not good enough, but because we were never meant to be seen here in the first place. I watch my son solve problems in his sleep. They'll say it came from the school, but it came from the kitchen table. This system isn't broken. It's working exactly the way it was designed to keep the wrong people out, even if they have the right answers. Noah turned page after page, breath tight, jaw clenched. He saw her calculations, dense, complex, and elegant, charting theoretical applications of modified integral structures that danced along the edge of chaos theory. She had discovered patterns in error correction models that mirrored biological survival systems, the kind of thinking that belonged in journals, conferences, textbooks. But here it was, silenced in a journal that no one at Belmont would ever read. Until now. In the final section of the book, her handwriting changed. It grew steadier, more deliberate, as if she knew these pages mattered most. If you're reading this, Noah, then I probably never got the chance to tell you in person. I saw the gift in you before the world did. You understood acceleration before you could spell it. You saw loops where others saw lines, and most importantly, you asked the one question that good mathematicians always ask: why? Noah wiped his eyes, but his vision didn't clear. He kept reading. There's a theory I never finished, partly because I didn't have the resources, but mostly because I knew the system would never accept it from me. But maybe, just maybe, they'll listen to you. Not because you're better, but because you got through their gate. Use that key, break the lock. And then, tucked behind the final page, folded like a secret too dangerous to name, was a letter. It was addressed to him. He unfolded it with shaking hands and saw equations scrawled in the margins. A raw draft of what appeared to be a reimagined form of calculus integration, one that treated outlier values not as noise, but as anchors. The logic was radical, unorthodox, but beautifully sound. It flipped traditional assumptions on their head. It wasn't just a theory. It was a challenge to the core framework of how calculus was taught and applied. Noah read it twice, then a third time. It made his mind burn and light up at the same time. It was far beyond what Harrow taught, beyond what Belmont's current syllabus even approached. This wasn't remedial genius. This was legacy-defining work, the kind of contribution that could reshape an entire discipline, and his mother had hidden it away in fear of ridicule. He pressed the paper to his chest, whispering her name like a prayer. The pain inside him twisted into something sharper, not grief, not rage, but clarity. For weeks he had been boxed into a narrative that didn't belong to him, labeled as an imposter, framed as a fraud, dissected by a system that never saw his humanity, only his deviation from the norm. But now, he had proof, not just of his ability, but of his inheritance. A mathematical fingerprint passed from mother to son, forged in the margins of rejection. And for the first time since the video leaked, Noah didn't feel small. He felt dangerous. He copied her equations onto fresh paper, annotated the logic, expanded the variables. There was enough here for a paper, maybe more. He could submit it to the upcoming National Calculus Conference under independent research. If it was accepted, it would force Belmont to acknowledge him, not as a scandal but as a mind they could no longer afford to erase. But the danger wasn't just theoretical. Belmont wouldn't go quietly. Harrow wouldn't let go of his grip that easily. And if this theory reached the public, it wouldn't just elevate Noah, it would expose how much talent the system had buried for generations. He closed the journal gently, like sealing a grave. On the inside cover, written in ink that had faded into ghost gray, was one last line: "I was never afraid of being wrong. I was afraid of never being heard." Noah stared at the words for a long time, then stood, eyes burning but steady. He packed the journal into his bag, zipped it shut, and walked out of the apartment into the morning sun. The world hadn't changed. The lies were still spreading. The inquiry was still alive. And Belmont's Cold War against him still pressed forward. But now, he had something they didn't expect: truth, wrapped in math, carved into silence, and prepared for war. That night, as Noah typed the first lines of his mother's unpublished theory into a digital document, his email pinged. It was from the National Calculus Conference Committee. The subject line read, "Submission accepted, you've been invited to present." But attached beneath it was another file, a security photo, taken outside his apartment hours earlier, captioned, "We see." Noah returned to Belmont, under a different kind of silence, not the silence of shame, but of strategy. He no longer walked with his head low, or his earbuds in. He watched, he listened, and most of all, he waited. The system had moved against him with surgical precision, but now he moved with intent, and the moment he stepped foot into the university's East Library wing, he knew exactly who he needed to find. Elena Whitmore wasn't hard to locate if you knew where to look. While others floated through campus halls in clusters of comfort, she moved like smoke, quiet, unnoticed, and always at the edge of the frame. She didn't belong to the faculty or the student body fully. A biracial grad assistant with a brilliant mind and no legacy name, she existed in that invisible space the university had no category for. And that was precisely why she saw things no one else did. She was in the archives room, surrounded by old course rosters and dusty academic logs, scanning documents into a database no one would read. When Noah entered, she didn't look up right away. Only after a long pause did she speak. "You came back." "I had to," he said, voice low. "But this time, I'm not alone." Her eyes finally met his. They held a depth that suggested she had waited too long for someone like him to say those words. She gestured toward the stack beside her. "Then you better understand what you're up against." Noah sat down beside her. The room smelled of paper and time, and in that moment, it felt like a war room dressed as a reading lounge. Elena pulled out a binder filled with student profiles, grading anomalies, and internal memos, all copied over the past year. Each file had a story. Each story echoed his. "There's a pattern," she said, flipping pages with surgical precision. "Start small. A lowered grade here. A missing recommendation there. But the key is timing. Right before scholarship renewals, grant applications or conference deadlines, these mistakes show up." Noah leaned in. "And they always happen to the same kinds of students." Elena nodded. "Black, first gen, or anyone who speaks too confidently in rooms they weren't expected to enter." She pulled out another folder, this one marked confidential. Inside were transcripts with two versions, side by side, one marked initial and the other final. The changes weren't clerical, they were strategic. A B+ turned into a C. A pass into an incomplete, always subtle enough to explain away, but consistent enough to destroy futures. Most students don't even know it happened, she said. By the time they figure it out, it's too late. Noah exhaled, his chest tightening. This wasn't just about him. It wasn't even about Harrow. It was about a machine that had learned how to erase people quietly, without fingerprints, without noise. Elena, why are you helping me? She hesitated. Her fingers stopped moving. Because they did it to my brother, she said. The room shifted. He was in the physics department. Got accepted to a NASA internship. Made it to the final round. Then one of his professors submitted a last-minute concern about his lab conduct. They said he was too aggressive. Too disruptive. He was denied the spot and lost his research funding the next semester. Had to drop out. Noah didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The pain was clear, and it ran deeper than anything the university's polished brochures would ever reveal. So when I saw them starting to circle you, she continued, I knew exactly what it was. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his mother's journal and theory draft. Then you need to see this. Elena read in silence for a full 10 minutes, her brow furrowing deeper with every line. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but trembling. This is real. It's hers, Noah said. But I've cleaned it up, annotated it. I want to submit it to the National Calculus Conference. Elena stared at the final page, eyes still locked on the rewritten theory. If you do that, she said slowly, you're not just poking the system anymore. You're detonating it. Noah's expression didn't waver. Good. But Elena looked more serious than ever. Noah, listen to me. What your mom wrote, and what you've turned it into, it doesn't just challenge Harrow. It exposes the entire academic framework they've built around exclusion. You think they came for you hard after that class video. This will make them rabid. He nodded. That's why I need to get ahead of it. Publish before they bury it. Let the world see the work before they kill the name attached to it. She was quiet for a long moment, then stood and walked to a locked cabinet at the back of the room. From it she retrieved a black flash drive and handed it to him. What is this? Everything they've tried to erase, she said. Documentation, grade edits, meeting transcripts, ghost-written recommendation letters for legacy students, even Brandon's. Noah looked up, stunned. You have proof they wrote his rec letters? Elena, he whispered. This could destroy them. That's the idea, she replied, then paused. But it could destroy you too. He tucked the drive into his jacket pocket. Then I guess we go down fighting. They spent the next hour mapping out a strategy. Submit the theory to the conference. Leak the grading corruption. Time it together. Force the university into a corner where denying one part meant drawing attention to the other. Let the world see the lie behind Belmont's prestige, and the brilliance it tried to bury. But just as they were finalizing the plan, Elena's phone buzzed. She checked the screen. Her expression changed. What is it? Noah asked. She showed him. A text. No name. No number. Stop helping him. We know who you are. Noah's jaw clenched. They're watching you now too. Elena looked away. They always were. She stared at the final page of his mother's theory, then back at him, her voice grave. If you publish this, it won't just shake this school. It'll threaten everything they built. And behind her, the security camera in the corner, one they hadn't noticed before, blinked red. The email sat in Noah's inbox like a spark waiting to ignite. Subject: National Calculus Conference. Paper accepted for presentation. Beneath it, the invitation was formal and glowing. Your paper, titled Boundary Reversal and Weighted Outliers in Modern Integration, has been selected for oral presentation at the National Calculus Conference in Baltimore. Noah stared at the words for a full minute, his heart pounding in a slow, steady rhythm. He had submitted the paper under his own name, but without Belmont's sponsorship, listed instead as independent research scholar. It was a gamble, bypassing the university's internal approval process, knowing Harrow and his allies would never allow it through their hands. But now it was real, not just accepted, invited. He forwarded the acceptance letter to Elena immediately. 3 minutes later, her response came back fast. It's happening. They won't take this quietly. Be ready. She was right. Within 36 hours, Belmont's Department of Mathematics sent Noah a curt email stating the conference had mistakenly listed him as a participant. It cited a supposed administrative error and asked him to clarify his authorization channel. The language was sterile, professional, but the message was unmistakably hostile. He didn't reply. Instead, he shared the acceptance letter on a locked academic forum and attached the paper for public review. That was the moment things escalated. The theory, based on his mother's journal, sparked heated discussion across faculty circles nationwide. Some praised its originality, others questioned its assumptions, but few could deny its mathematical rigor. And soon, the online discourse reached a boiling point when an anonymous leak posted an internal Belmont email to Reddit. The screenshot showed a message from Professor Harrow, dated just 2 days after Noah's video had gone viral. "He's a statistical fluke with a chip on his shoulder. We should be focusing our support on candidates who actually represent Belmont's academic spirit." The backlash was immediate. Faculty across the country, many of whom had fought their own battles within elite academic circles, began speaking up. Professors from Howard, Rutgers, MIT, and even Stanford posted support for Noah's submission. Alumni donors started asking Belmont for answers. A journalist from the Chronicle of Higher Education requested a formal interview with Noah, citing the growing national interest in his paper. The school scrambled to contain the damage. Noah was suddenly asked to meet with Belmont's academic affairs office. The meeting was scheduled in a nondescript conference room on the 3rd floor of the administration building, the kind of room where decisions were made without witnesses. Noah walked in alone, facing 3 faculty members he had never met before, all of whom introduced themselves with practiced neutrality. "We're not here to challenge your academic integrity," one of them said. "Then what are you here to do?" Noah asked, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to help you understand how certain choices might affect your long-term relationship with the university." Noah leaned forward. "You mean my scholarship?" A pause, a flicker of discomfort in their eyes. "We simply want to ensure that all public representation aligns with Belmont's mission." He pulled out a printed copy of his paper and laid it on the table. "This is Belmont's mission. Or at least it should be." They didn't respond. The meeting dissolved into vague assurances and ambiguous warnings. But Noah walked out with a sharper understanding than ever. They weren't trying to guide him. They were trying to intimidate him. The polished language had only been a veil for the fear beneath. Fear that his paper, his presence, and his mother's theory would expose Belmont's fragile academic hierarchy for the illusion it truly was. He stepped into the hallway feeling strangely lighter, as if their attempts to cage him had only clarified the size of the cage. Elena found him near the stairwell, clutching her laptop to her chest, eyes burning with urgency. "What happened?" she asked. "They're scared," he replied, descending the stairs beside her. "They're really scared." "Good," she said quietly. "Let them be." They walked together through the campus courtyard, where clusters of students murmured as Noah passed. Some stared with open hostility, others with cautious curiosity. A few whispered his name like it carried danger. But none of it slowed him down. Elena kept pace, her steps matching his. At the bottom of the stairs, she exhaled sharply. "Noah, you need to know something. I caught wind of a closed-door faculty meeting yesterday. Harrow's pushing to retract your acceptance from the conference entirely. He's saying you violated research protocol by not submitting through Belmont."
Noah stopped walking. "He doesn't have that authority."
"He doesn't need authority," she said. "He has influence." They began walking again, turning toward the science quad. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the brick walkway, stretching like warnings. Students filtered around them, oblivious to the storm building in the admin suites above their heads. Noah asked, "Do we know who leaked Harrow's email?" Elena hesitated. "Not yet, but I'm trying to find out. Whoever did it, they're closer than you think." He studied her expression. There was something else she wasn't saying, but before he could press, she nodded toward the library entrance. "Come on, there's something you need to see." Inside, she led him to a secluded carrel in the lower level. A single lamp lit the desk with a buttery glow. Stacks of documents waited. Printouts, screenshots, archived emails, and student records she'd spent weeks quietly collecting. She sank into the chair opposite him. "This is the pattern. Grade suppression committee blocks. Hidden red flags and profiles. Everything they've used on students like you. And the timing's deliberate. They strike when your momentum is highest." He sifted through the pile, each document more damning than the last. A suppressed funding recommendation for a black chemistry student. An altered transcript for a Latini economics major. A memo discussing fit concerns regarding a low-income engineering student who scored highest in the department's lab competition. "This is a whole ecosystem of sabotage," Noah whispered. Elena nodded. "And Harrow is just one branch of it." He rubbed his forehead, absorbing the breadth of the rot. "If I present at the conference, this won't just expose him. It'll expose all of it. That's why they're trying so hard to stop you." They didn't speak for a long moment. Then Elena reached across the desk, her voice soft but resolute. Noah, you have something none of the others had. You have proof, yes, but you also have motive. You're fighting with legacy behind you. Your mother's theory, her work, it gives you a platform. No one can deny. You're not just challenging their system. You're rewriting it. He swallowed hard. And that's why they want me gone. She nodded. They're terrified that once your work hits the academic circuit, people will start asking how a so-called statistical fluke produced a theory that surpasses the department's leading scholars. He closed the folder gently. Then I need to go. I need to stand on that stage in Baltimore. You will, she said. But you need to understand the price. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her face drained. Noah leaned in. What is it? She handed him the phone with a trembling hand. It was an email forwarded anonymously. Subject: urgent. Conference retraction request. Sender: Professor Emmett Harrow. Recipient: Conference Board Director. The message read, this student is under investigation for academic misconduct and has falsely claimed authorship of original material. We strongly advise the committee to rescind his invitation immediately. Belmont University cannot endorse this individual in any capacity. Attached was a PDF of the misconduct case file, incomplete, unverified, and deliberately framed to appear damning. He's trying to poison the well before you get there, Elena said. If the board believes this, they'll blacklist you from more than just this one conference. Noah felt the familiar tightness in his chest, but it wasn't panic. It was fury shaped into focus. He can't stop the truth, he said quietly. No, Elena agreed, but he can bury you before you speak it. Before they could discuss next steps, another notification pinged, this time on Noah's phone. A text from an unknown number. He opened it. Withdraw, or the university will revoke your scholarship and degree. He stared at the message, every muscle in his body stilling. Elena whispered, Noah, they're cornering you. But Noah didn't flinch. Then they're about to find out what happens when you corner the wrong person. He lifted his gaze, and for the first time, Elena saw a spark in him that didn't come from pain, but from the fire beneath it. Still, she looked frightened. You need to think carefully. If you go to that conference, you won't just be fighting Harrow. You'll be fighting the entire institution. Noah put his phone down slowly. Good. Then they can all watch me win. As he stood to leave, another message flashed onto his screen. This one a video clip sent anonymously. Harrow's voice echoed through the speakers. It doesn't matter what he presents. We'll strip him of everything, before he even gets on that stage. And beneath it, final warning. Baltimore's convention center loomed like a cathedral of expectation. Glass walls gleaming beneath a gray sky. Banners of the National Calculus Conference draped proudly across its facade. Inside, Noah walked through the vast halls not as a guest, but as a marked man. Every footstep echoed with the weight of weeks of sabotage, threats and silence. Yet he moved with the poise of someone who had nothing left to prove, only something to reveal. Elena trailed just behind, clipboard in hand, phone on silent. She wore a black blazer, her curls tied back with purpose. She had been Noah's strategist, archivist and guardian in the shadows. But today they were both under lights that didn't blink. Media crews had arrived, far more than expected. Rumors of Belmont's internal war had already made it to academic blogs and X threads. A black student accused of cheating had not only retained his spot at the most prestigious conference of the year, he was opening the session with an original paper that critics were calling the most disruptive dibbery since Bounded Divergence. As Noah checked in at the registration table, a middle-aged woman with clipped speech handed him his name badge. Noah Darnell. Session A1, main lecture hall, she said. Then, lowering her voice slightly, added, they'll be watching everything. He gave a quiet nod, took the badge, and walked into the main auditorium. The lecture hall was massive, auditorium seating for nearly 1,000 tiered with bright white lights, sterile rows, and an imposing stage with dual projectors. Faculty from Ivy League institutions were already settling into their seats, murmuring with folded arms and furrowed brows. Some had printed copies of his paper. Others scanned it from tablets, red pens poised. There were no students, only gatekeepers. Noah sat backstage for 15 minutes, listening to the moderator introduce the conference theme. This year, she said, we celebrate those who challenge the edges of classical mathematics. The irony was heavy. He was the edge they hadn't invited yet couldn't ignore. Elena leaned toward him, whispering, this is it. Once you start, there's no walking back. Noah nodded. Good. Then his name was called. He stepped onto the stage under blinding lights and sharper gazes. The projector flashed his title slide, boundary reversal, and weighted outliers in modern integration. Darnell, he adjusted the mic, glanced once at Elena in the wings, then began. I'd like to dedicate this presentation to the mathematician who taught me how to see what others call error as possibility. Her name was Charlene Darnell. Some in the audience shifted, uncomfortable with emotion this early. But Noah didn't flinch. He dove into the work, not as a student seeking approval, but as a peer defending truth. The theory flowed out of him like second nature. He walked them through the failure of classical boundary assumptions when applied to real-world outlier events, demonstrating how traditional calculus misclassified fringe data as statistical noise, when in fact, it was structurally significant. He cited models in climate science, economics, even epidemiology, where overlooked anomalies cost millions in predictive accuracy. At the 12-minute mark, murmurs began. Heads tilted, pens slowed. By minute 18, a professor from Stanford leaned forward. At 21, the Columbia rep whispered something to the Yale delegate. Noah reached his final segment, the proof. I present now a modification to the standard integral model, one that weights outliers not by exclusion, but by inverse proximity. He moved to the chalkboard and wrote a condensed equation with elegant precision. Gasps broke the silence. But before he could turn back to explain the final variable, a voice sliced through the room like a blade. That's enough. Noah turned. From the double doors at the back of the auditorium, Professor Emmett Harrow had entered, uninvited, unannounced, and unashamed. The air shifted immediately. Noah lowered the chalk, slowly turning to face the man who had worked tirelessly to silence him. Harrow walked down the aisle like a prosecutor in his own courtroom, suit pressed, face expressionless, but eyes gleaming with something sharper than skepticism. He stopped near the front row, turned to the moderator, and addressed her with false courtesy. I apologize for the interruption, he said, but I believe it's my duty as a tenured professor at Belmont University to raise an immediate objection. The moderator blinked. This is a scheduled session, Professor. Yes, Harrow cut in, voice calm but loaded. A session based on a paper currently under active investigation for plagiarism. A wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. The word plagiarism hit like a dropped match in a dry forest. Every pen lifted, every gaze sharpened. Harrow gestured toward the projector. This theory, while cleverly restructured, is derivative of work published 10 years ago by Dr. Ernest Lin at MIT. I have copies of the paper here. Several core equations bear striking resemblance, down to notation choices. He held up a printout. Noah stood frozen for a beat, his pulse thunderous. Then he walked calmly back to the podium. May I respond? The moderator hesitated, then nodded. Noah reached into his bag and pulled out a leather-bound book, his mother's journal, and a second folder filled with annotated drafts, time-stamped edits, and archived email confirmations. The theory I've presented is based on a framework developed by Charlene Darnell, my mother, who began formulating it in the early 2000s while enrolled at Pinwood State. He said clearly, lifting the journal for the audience to see. Her work predates the MIT paper by nearly 5 years. He flipped open the folder, holding up a scanned image. This is a photo of a page from her journal, dated 2003, verified through third-party metadata. Here is a typed version, showing the evolution of the equation in question, including the variable that Dr. Lin's paper never addressed. He clicked to the next slide. A comparison between his model and Lin's appeared side by side. The difference was obvious. Where Lin's model discarded fringe data, Noah's theory restructured the entire integration process around it, turning anomaly into anchor. Harrow's face didn't move, but his knuckles whitened. And finally, Noah continued. I'd like to show one more comparison. He pulled up an image on the projector, a page from one of Harrow's own publications, dated 5 years ago. This is from Professor Harrow's 2018 paper on probability decay. Note the final formula structure here. He highlighted a segment in red, and compare it to this model published 2 years earlier in an independent open-access thesis by a student at Howard University, Danielle Keene. Gasps rose from the audience. Noah turned to Harrow. The similarity is uncanny. Was that too a coincidence? The room was now electric. The Stanford professor leaned forward. The Yale delegate had begun filming. Even the moderator was pale. Harrow opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. He stared at the screen, then at Noah, then down at the paper still shaking in his hand. Noah's voice stayed steady. Academic rigor isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can show the work. And I've shown mine. The silence that followed was thunderous. Then, applause. Not scattered. Not polite. Real, rising applause. Professors standing. Heads nodding. Someone whistled from the back. Cameras flashed. And for the first time, Noah saw Harrow not as a towering figure of authority, but as a man exposed under the very spotlight he had tried to weaponize. Harrow's lips curled into something bitter. He stepped forward and muttered, just loud enough for Noah to hear, "Expulsion." And then he turned and stormed out of the auditorium. Noah didn't flinch. He closed the presentation, thanked the audience, and exited backstage to the roar still echoing in the chamber behind him. Elena was there, jaw slightly open, holding up her phone. You just turned an ambush into a masterclass." He didn't smile. He couldn't. Not yet. "What happens now?" he asked. Before she could answer, a Belmont admin burst into the hallway, face pale, phone in hand. "Noah, they've frozen your university login. Your student account access is gone." "What?" "And there's more," the admin said, breathless. "A memo just leaked. Faculty board vote scheduled for tomorrow morning." "For what?" Elena asked, already knowing. The admin hesitated. "A full vote on disciplinary expulsion." Noah's phone vibrated again. A new message. No name, no number, just a single line. "You embarrassed the wrong institution. Tomorrow you're finished." The video of Noah's presentation hit the internet like a match to dry leaves. Within hours, clips from the conference flooded academic Twitter and spilled onto mainstream platforms. The moment Noah held up his mother's journal and publicly dismantled both Harrow's plagiarism accusation and his own institutional erasure, was shared and reshared with captions like "Young Genius Exposes Racist Professor Live. This is what decolonizing academia looks like." And they tried to erase him. He brought receipts. The applause inside that hall didn't stay there. It traveled. Fast. Black student groups across the country reposted the footage with threads detailing not just Noah's courage, but the generations of students who had been destroyed in silence. Former Belmont students began to speak up, anonymously at first, then with names. Stories of silenced complaints, blocked promotions, and unspoken quotas poured out in a wave that could no longer be dismissed as isolated incidents. Back on Belmont's campus, the mood was no longer icy. It was electric. Angry. Awake. By the next morning, the quiet walkways of the quad had transformed into a staging ground. Posters of Noah's face lined the trees, not as warnings, but as banners. "We stand with Darnell" was spray-painted onto cardboard signs carried by protesters from every college of the university. Students gathered on the steps of the administration building, with bullhorns, chanting for accountability. Someone blasted the conference audio through a speaker, Noah's voice echoing off stone. "Academic rigor isn't about who shouts loudest, it's about who shows the work." That line turned into a hashtag. "Show the work" trended nationally by noon. Faculty couldn't ignore it. Local reporters arrived by 2 p.m. By 4, Belmont's president released a bland 2-paragraph statement calling for civility and further review. But no one wanted civility. They wanted truth. They wanted action. As calls to fire Harrow intensified, the university's board convened an emergency session. But instead of opening an investigation into the professor, they closed ranks. The administration issued a new internal memo declaring the need for institutional stability amid media distortion. Translation: protect Harrow. Contain Noah. That decision hit like a slap. By nightfall, the protests swelled. What began with students became a broader coalition. Alumni, local organizers, even parents. Speakers rallied on the lawn with megaphones, reading aloud from Harrow's leaked emails. One student recited the quote that had surfaced from a private faculty group chat. "If we let him win, we open the floodgates. This place will look like a protest campus within a year." They were right. Now it did. But not everyone marching carried banners. Some walked with clenched fists and bitter eyes. A countercurrent had formed, quiet but present among students, who felt the university was under attack, who saw Noah not as a survivor, but as a threat to the order they'd inherited. Whispers turned into flyers taped in bathroom stalls. "Affirmative action has gone too far." Anonymous online forums buzzed with veiled threats and calls to restore balance. The campus wasn't just a battleground. It was breaking apart. Noah stayed silent through it all, tucked inside a quiet corner of the library with Elena, monitoring the news and preparing for the faculty vote that would determine whether he remained a student at all. The two of them barely slept. Between interviews, documents, and screenshots, they built a full report, a case not just for Noah's innocence, but for the institutional rot that Harrow represented. "We have everything," Elena said, laying out a printed timeline. "Ghost-written letters, redacted transcripts, the original journal scans. There's no way they can expel you without exposing themselves." Noah looked at the growing folder of evidence. "They've already made up their minds," he murmured. "The vote's a formality. The damage is done." She leaned closer, her voice steady. "Then let them vote, and when they do, we'll burn the whole lie down." Outside, chants echoed off the stone walls, pulsing louder than any lecture ever held in Belmont's halls. But something about the silence in Noah's chest felt heavier, as if the storm hadn't peaked yet. He left the library just after midnight, returning to his dorm alone. The halls were quiet, the campus surreal in the moonlight. As he climbed the stairs to his floor, a strange chill crawled over his skin. The usual bulletin board near the elevator had been stripped bare, every flyer gone. The light near his room flickered. He reached his door, inserted the key, and froze. The number plate on his door, A319, had been scratched out. In its place, someone had carved 3 words into the wood with what looked like a knife. "You don't belong." His breath caught. He pushed the door open. Inside, his mattress had been slashed open, papers shredded. The walls were covered in spray paint, red, dripping, chaotic. One phrase stretched across the largest wall, jagged and loud. "Leave now or else." He stood in the doorway for several seconds, unmoving, unblinking. Behind him, the hallway remained empty. Quiet, watching. Noah walked in slowly, surveying the destruction. His mother's journal, gone. His laptop missing. The last remaining printout of his annotated paper, soaked in water, and tossed onto the floor. He picked it up with shaking hands. The ink had bled, but one line remained clear, the closing statement of his theory. "Anomalies are not weakness. They are the structure's test of truth." He stared at it until the page crumpled in his hands. A soft knock hit his doorframe. He turned quickly, but no one was there. Just another note taped carefully to the wall. "Tomorrow's vote won't matter. You're already finished." The hearing was not held in a courtroom, nor in any building associated with fairness. Instead, they chose the administrative annex, a cold, windowless wing tucked behind the old law library. Noah arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in a pressed gray sweater and slacks, carrying nothing but a folder containing the last intact copy of his annotated theory. The rest had been destroyed during the vandalism. There were no signs, no witnesses, no media, just a heavy wooden door marked "Private Session, Do Not Disturb." Inside, the room looked more like a disciplinary review than an academic panel. 5 faculty members sat behind a curved table, all white, all senior, all tenured. 3 were known allies of Harrow. One was the university's ethics officer, whose public neutrality was a mask for procedural ruthlessness. The 5th, a woman from the provost's office, avoided Noah's gaze entirely. He took the lone seat at the center of the room, isolated by design. A single overhead light cast an unforgiving glow on his face, while the panel sat in soft shadow. There were no legal representatives allowed. No advisors, no Elena, just silence, power and intention. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Mr. Darnell, this is not a trial. This is a fact-finding review to determine whether your continued enrollment aligns with Belmont's academic standards." Noah gave a slight nod. "I understand," she continued, reading from a pre-written statement. "You are here due to allegations involving academic dishonesty, falsified research, behavioral disruption, and unauthorized publication under the Belmont banner." "I never claimed Belmont endorsed my paper," Noah replied evenly. "You listed Belmont as your institution of origin," she snapped. "Because I am a student here." The panel didn't flinch. The tone had already been set. What followed was an hour of controlled interrogation. They questioned the authorship of his paper, hinting it was ghostwritten. They pulled up his SAT scores, asking how a student with a modest math section could produce such advanced theoretical work. They referenced his mother's journal as non-peer-reviewed material of questionable validity. One panelist even asked if he had been coached by external groups pushing a political agenda. Noah answered every question without anger, but with sharp, contained energy. "My scores were earned, my work is original, and my mother's theories were mathematically sound, regardless of where she earned them." He glanced at the woman from the provost's office. She looked away, The ethics officer leaned forward. Mr. Darnell, be honest. Isn't it true that you've benefited from certain institutional programs designed to promote underrepresented applicants? Noah met his stare. Isn't it true that you've used your position to protect faculty who undermine those same applicants? The room went still. No one responded. In the corner, behind a stack of university reports, Elena's recording device sat hidden inside a hollowed-out calculus textbook, planted hours earlier with the help of a sympathetic janitor. It captured everything. Every coded phrase, every veiled accusation, every moment they twisted Noah's past into evidence of fraudulence. At one point, the chairwoman asked, "And your mother, was she ever officially published in any academic journal?" Noah's voice lowered. "No, because men like Harrow wouldn't read her work." The chairwoman exhaled slowly, as if exhausted by the truth. As the questioning dragged on, Noah could feel the verdict tightening like a noose. It wasn't about evidence. It never had been. This was a ceremony of erasure. Scripted, rehearsed, perfected over decades. They weren't here to understand. They were here to finalize what Harrow had already begun. And just as the chairwoman opened her folder to call the vote, footsteps echoed outside the door. Quick, purposeful, unexpected. The panel froze. The footsteps stopped just outside. Then the doorknob turned, not hesitantly, but with the kind of authority that didn't ask permission. The door opened. In stepped a tall black woman in a navy blazer, glasses low on her nose, a brown leather satchel slung over one shoulder. She didn't speak at first. She simply stood there, letting her presence settle like dust on polished veneer. The chairwoman frowned. "This is a closed hearing. I'm aware," the woman said calmly. "And I'm here to challenge its legitimacy." The room shifted, not visibly, but internally. Power, previously concentrated behind the table, cracked. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a folded letter. "Dr. Lydia Green, tenured professor of mathematics at MIT. I'm also the recipient of the National Medal of Science and one of the academic reviewers for the National Calculus Conference." The panel stared. "I've reviewed Mr. Nell's work," she continued, "and I've reviewed the treatment he's received since presenting it. The level of institutional hostility is not only unethical, it borders on retaliatory misconduct." The ethics officer stood slowly. "Dr. Green, this is Belmont University. With all respect." "With all respect," she cut in, "your institution has attempted to expel a student not for plagiarism, but for surpassing your expectations of him." She turned to Noah, offering a faint nod of acknowledgement. "Not as mentor to mentee, but scholar to scholar. I flew in last night after seeing the footage of your presentation," she said, voice low but clear. "I've read the full paper, studied the appendices, and verified your annotations. Your mother's theory is not only original, it's revolutionary. You've extended her logic with mathematical precision that deserves publication, not punishment." The panel was silent. Dr. Green turned back to them. "If you vote to expel him today, make it clear. You're not defending academic integrity. You're protecting a caste system." The chairwoman flushed. "This is not how internal reviews operate." "I know exactly how internal reviews operate," Dr. Green replied. "That's why I came." She stepped aside and placed a USB drive on the table. "Here's a time-stamped verification of authorship from 3 independent researchers. It includes metadata from Noah's early drafts, footage of his original annotations, and supporting proof from open-source tools used in peer review." Then her tone shifted. Gentler, but no less pointed. "This young man doesn't need Belmont to succeed. But if you push him out, Belmont will be remembered not as the place that educated him, but as the institution that tried to silence him." The panel didn't respond immediately. The provost's officer looked like she wanted to disappear. The ethics chair cleared his throat but said nothing. Only the woman beside him spoke. A single cold line meant to reclaim control. "Dr. Green, your testimony is noted, but this hearing remains under Belmont's jurisdiction." Dr. Green smiled. "Then I suggest you make your decision carefully, because starting tomorrow, jurisdiction won't mean much when the rest of the academic world is watching." With that, she sat down behind Noah, silently showing him what no one else at that table ever had, that he was not alone. The chairwoman, visibly shaken, turned to her panel. "We will take 5 minutes to deliberate privately." The lights dimmed slightly. A curtain was drawn. Whispered arguments began behind it. Noah sat in stillness. Dr. Green said nothing. Her presence was her protection. Elena's recorder, still hidden in the hollow book, captured every second of the moment that power hesitated. The curtain drew back after exactly 5 minutes. The chairwoman, voice tight, announced, "We have reached a preliminary vote. Mr. Darnell." She didn't finish, because just then, the room's intercom system clicked alive. A student staffer's voice cut through. "Apologies, but you need to see this. You're trending worldwide, and there's a protest forming outside the building. They want the vote made public." The ethics officer stood, walked to the blinds, and pulled them open. Hundreds of students were gathered below, holding signs chanting Noah's name and projecting his conference presentation onto the building's exterior wall. And in the crowd, one face stood out: Professor Harrow, watching silently from the back. From the second the blinds lifted and the tribunal saw the sea of bodies outside, the room's temperature changed. What had been a controlled private ambush now stood exposed, broadcast to an angry, watchful crowd whose chants cracked through the glass like thunder. On the steps of the administrative annex, students held signs that read, "Belmont's real math problem is racism, proof over privilege, and Noah Darnell is the future." At the back of the protest, Harrow stood motionless in a charcoal trench coat, face unreadable, but eyes burning with disbelief. Inside, the panel tried to compose itself, but the facade of neutrality had already fractured. No one could pretend this was still just about academic protocol. The crowd had forced the narrative out of closed doors, and now, the university had a choice: correct its path or protect its power. Noah remained seated, jaw tense, his hands resting on the folder he hadn't opened since the hearing began. Beside him, Dr. Lydia Green didn't blink. She sat with the calm of someone who had dismantled institutions before and knew exactly where to apply pressure. The chairwoman, looking visibly rattled, turned to the panel. "We will reconvene this hearing at a later." "No," Green said sharply, rising to her feet. "You won't." The room turned silent again. "Every second you delay," Green said, "you confirm to that crowd and to the country that truth in this institution depends on who's allowed to speak it." The ethics officer shifted. "With respect, Green, this university must consider legal liability, public image. You've already lost control of the narrative," she snapped. "Your liability now is inaction." She took a step forward, her voice rising, not loud but deliberate. Measure. Each word carried like a courtroom verdict. "Noah Darnell's work is not only valid, it's revolutionary. His paper is already being circulated in academic circles across the country, and I am here, not as a guest, but as a representative of MIT's Department of Mathematics, to formally announce that should Belmont choose to expel this student, he will be immediately offered a full academic transfer with complete scholarship support and research placement." The panel gasped. Even the chairwoman faltered. "You can choose," Green continued, "to uphold your legacy of gatekeeping, silence, and sabotage, or you can get on the right side of history." Noah didn't move. His breath slowed, anchoring to the weight of her words. It wasn't just validation. It was redemption. And for the first time since his arrival at Belmont, he felt the armor of someone else's authority shielding him. But this time in service of truth, not oppression. The provost officer, eyes wide, whispered something to the chairwoman. The ethics officer cleared his throat and said flatly, "We will reconvene for vote deliberation." But before he could finish, the door opened again. Professor Harrow walked in. He didn't glance at the crowd behind him. He didn't look at Noah. His eyes went straight to Lydia Green.
"You're out of line," he said, voice taut with restrained fury. "This is not your institution. You don't get to walk in here and rewrite our standards."
Green didn't flinch. "I'm not rewriting your standards. I'm exposing that you've never applied them equally." Harrow stepped forward, barely containing himself. "You're standing here waving a scholarship like it's some kind of weapon." "No," Green said. "Your bias is the weapon. And it's been aimed at students like Noah for years." The air in the room went rigid. Harrow turned to the panel. "If Belmont sides with this outsider intervention, I will file a formal lawsuit against the university for defamation and professional damage. I will take this institution to court, and I will not be the only one." He looked pointedly at the provost's officer. "Do you really want to open that door?" The panel fell into chaos. Whispered side conversations. Nervous glances. The university president was texted. Legal counsel was called. For a moment it looked as if they might fold inward. Not from lack of evidence but fear of exposure. But Noah stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't point fingers. He simply walked to the front of the room and placed a single item on the tribunal table. A flash drive. Everything Harrow has done. It's on there. The edited grades. The ghost-written recommendations. The internal group chats mocking students of color. You can bury it. Or you can read it. He turned to face the room. But know this, the world is already watching. The only question now is whether Belmont University still wants to be believed. Green stood behind him, and suddenly the tribunal looked like what it truly was. Not a court of truth, but a collapsing tower of defense. Harrow's face had gone pale. He said nothing more, just stormed out of the room in silence, his coat whipping behind him like a closing curtain. The panel didn't render a vote that day. The meeting adjourned under pending review. But it was clear to everyone inside that the game had changed. The institution had been cracked wide open, and its protectors had been caught without cover. Noah left the room to roaring cheers outside. Students surrounded him. Hands gripped his shoulders. A professor from the sociology department hugged him tightly. Reporters shouted questions. Elena found him near the edge of the crowd, eyes glossy with pride and relief. "You did it," she said. "No," Noah replied quietly. "We did." But celebration came with weight. By evening, Belmont's leadership released a cautious statement, acknowledging a review of departmental conduct. They did not mention Harrow by name. They did not mention Noah's scholarship. It was a political move, a stall tactic. Dr. Green had warned him. They'll backpedal in public, then retaliate in private. Watch what they do next. That warning came true faster than expected. At 9:17 p.m., a whistleblower posted to an anonymous academic subreddit a compressed file containing Harrow's private emails, leaked by someone inside Belmont's IT system. Within minutes, the contents hit Twitter. What they revealed shattered whatever credibility Harrow had left. Subject lines like "Quota Watch 2023" and "DEI smokescreen." "Keep the real stats quiet" led to trails of messages filled with racial slurs, internal complaints mocked openly, and disturbing discussions about neutralizing student activism through grading patterns. One message read, "The math department is not a diversity shelter. We protect our reputation by knowing who to elevate and who to eliminate quietly." Another, dated just 2 weeks before Noah's viral presentation, "If this kid gets to present nationally, the floodgates open. I don't care how clean it looks. Bury him in bureaucracy if you have to." And then, the most devastating line of all, sent to Brandon Keswick, "If you can't beat him with math, beat him with narrative. I'll make sure the board plays along." The emails spread like wildfire. Professors from across the country condemned Harrow publicly. MIT released a follow-up statement, praising Dr. Green's intervention and calling for transparent restructuring at Belmont. Belmont's own alumni began calling for the president's resignation. The math department's chair announced a temporary leave of absence. Noah didn't read the messages. He didn't need to. He felt the shift in the way strangers now addressed him, not with skepticism, but respect. Not as an anomaly, but as a symbol. Still, late that night, in the quiet of his temporary dorm room, Noah sat alone. He pulled out a new journal, untouched blank. He wrote one sentence on the first page: "This is for every genius the system never let speak." Just as he closed the book, a ping hit his laptop. An encrypted message. Sender unannounced. Subject: "You think Harrow was the end." Attached, a faculty spreadsheet, revealing a secret donor-funded list of flag disruptors, and Noah's name is still at the top. When the files hit the internet, they detonated like hidden mines under the foundation of every polished hallway at Belmont University. What started as a leak, a compressed archive posted to an anonymous academic subreddit, spread within minutes. The subject line alone froze stomachs and opened wounds. Internal correspondence, math depth integrity files. As journalists, students, and alumni clicked, the world watched the thin veil of prestige shred in real time. Inside the archive were hundreds of emails, memos, notes, all stamped with Belmont internal headers. The first one was from Professor Harrow, dated 2 years earlier, subject Quota Watch 2023, new admissions round. In it, he wrote, "We need to keep our brand clean. Quota kids look good on paper until they fail us publicly. That's when we silently move them out." The casual cruelty of those words hit harder than any accusation. Below him, a chain of dean assistants and department administrators committed to the same covert project, nodded in agreement, with minutes, meeting notes, a schedule for interventions and flagged exits. The second email was worse. From a senior faculty member to Brandon Keswick, the legacy student who had first recorded Noah's board humiliation. It read, "The kid from Maryland? He's our next lab removal. Grade suppression will handle it. Keep files clean. I don't want media smoke." Attached was a spreadsheet with dozens of names. Black, Latinx, first gen, all flagged simply as Tier D Phase 2. As the leak spread, the media fractured the story wide open. Headlines screamed, Belmont's hidden database of quota kids exposed. Math department's racist file, how students were systematically silenced. Exclusive, internal emails show why so many POC left elite STEM schools. Social media erupted, screenshots, commentaries, interviews, demands for resignations. Former students, especially black and brown, came forward under pseudonyms at first, then many revealed themselves, sharing stories that matched the documents, erased grades, lost scholarships, ghostwritten letters, coached silence, and academic careers derailed for simply stepping across an unspoken line. On campus, the atmosphere dissolved into chaos. The quad, once filled with student protests for justice, now cracked under pressure from media vans and cameras. Reporters flooded in, wiring the administration building for live feeds. The Board of Trustees, long silent on the matter, announced an emergency session within 24 hours. In every dorm, in every stairwell, the leaked emails circulated. Screenshots pinned to bulletin boards. Students whispered in hallways. The word scandal followed every face. Noah watched it from the center of the storm. He stood outside the building late at night, the concrete cold under his hands, a megaphone tape idle by his side. His mother's theory was only the spark. These emails were the gasoline. He wasn't just fighting for his place, he was fighting for the truth, for every student who had been quietly expelled, silenced, or made to vanish from academic records. Elena stood beside him, phone in hand, capturing the flickering live news coverage. They did this, she whispered. They built a system to push people out before they ever got a chance. He nodded, voice low. And now everyone sees the blueprint. The university's official statement came early the next morning. Brief, sterile, defensive. It acknowledged receipt of serious allegations regarding departmental conduct, assured full cooperation with oversight, and promised transparency. It did not mention any names. It did not commit to accountability. It did not apologize. But the leaks had spoken louder than the statement ever could. The Board of Trustees convened in closed chambers. Members flew in. Advisors whispered. Lawyers typed. Crisis PR teams prepared press releases. Donors called in. Alumni demanded immediate changes. The pressure was suffocating. Their shields wouldn't hold. Inside one of the trustees' chambers, the lead trustee, an older man with blue-gray hair and a stiff tie, slammed his fist on the table. They can't do this to us. We're Belmont. We built this reputation. If this gets out, our endowment, our rankings, it's gone. Another shook her head. Then we act fast. We clean house. We isolate Harrow. We offer settlements. We spin it as a regrettable misstep. She glanced at a printed email, shaking slightly. But the truth is already out. People began whispering about damage control, quiet resignations, legal non-disclosure deals, paid exit packages. But public outrage had momentum. It couldn't be bought or buried. On campus, solidarity strengthened. Student organizations, formerly scattered, united under a new banner, Math for All. At midday rallies, speakers read from the leaked emails. The same board that had judged Noah began voting for change. Crowds chanted, "Expose the system, expose the system." Older alumni, those who had once benefited from the institution's protection, joined calls for divestment, apology, and reform. The media spotlight expanded. National newspapers, academic journals, advocacy blogs, all turned their attention to Belmont. The scandal moved from local outrage to national reckoning. Other universities quietly reviewed their own conduct. The leak sparked fear, the fear of being next. In the midst of it, the Board of Trustees released a new decision. The department head, and by extension, any implicated faculty, would be placed on administrative leave, pending review. Among those named was Professor Harrow. The announcement said nothing about charges, nothing about wrongdoing, only that he was temporarily relieved of duties pending investigation. Harrow's name was absent from future class rosters. His office emptied, his credentials suspended. But behind closed doors, something darker stirred. In the dim light of his small off-campus apartment, Harrow dialed a burner phone. His voice was low, controlled, calm. "We've been exposed," he said. "But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." On the other end, a voice, quieter, colder, responded with certainty. "Then proceed with Plan B. Meet me tomorrow, and make sure Brandon knows the assignment. He ended the call, lit a cigarette, and stared at the glowing tip. The fire crackled. Despite daylight, his room felt colder than any claustrophobic tribunal hall. Noah watched the news unfold, exhaustion dragging at his bones, relief mingled with dread. Harrow was sidelined, yes, but sidelined could mean many things. Terminated? Or hidden, locked away in shadows until the storm passed. At noon, a new leak threatened the fragile calm. An anonymous email to every student and faculty inbox. Subject: donor fund alert. Department reorganization. Attached a spreadsheet marked flag disruptors. No further funding. The list was long, mostly names of minority students and outspoken activists. At the top, in bold, was Noah Darn. He stared at the screen. The world had watched one injustice unravel. But the system's machinery of erasure didn't stop with one man. It mutates. It evolves. Elena closed her laptop, breathing shallow. They're trying to rebuild the walls with barbed wire this time. He closed his eyes, thinking of the flood of hate when the video first circulated. The threats, the anonymous calls, the vandalized dorm, and now this, a donor-backed blacklist, masquerading as reorganization. He opened his eyes, determination hardened in their depths. They can plaster me on top, he said quietly. But I'm not leaving. Neither are the others. As the campus prepared for a renewed protest, news outlets began reporting that Harrow was seen meeting late at night with Brandon Keswick and several unknown men outside a warehouse on the outskirts of town. A single flashed headline closed the broadcast loop. Corruption can't die. It adapts. The leaked spreadsheet sent a shiver through the campus, not because it was surprising, but because it confirmed what so many students of color had long suspected. There had always been invisible lines, unspoken rules, doors that refused to open. But now the system's inner gears were exposed, and they were sharp, intentional, and built to cut. Noah wasn't the only name highlighted. Under his, rows of students appeared, each labeled with cryptic codes: D1, F flag, silent transfer, watch list, reorg. Some were current juniors, others were already gone, their stories ending in sudden withdrawals or mysteriously revoked scholarships. Faculty email chains revealed suggested removals months in advance, long before any student showed signs of academic struggle. The term flagged disruptors haunted every page. On social media, Belmont's account stopped posting. Every upload was drowned in comments. Justice for Noah, math for all, exposed the list. Alumni publicly cut ties. Donors pulled pledges. Departments across other universities demanded Belmont be stripped of its accreditation, unless real accountability followed. Still, despite being placed on leave, Harrow moved in silence. His meeting with Brandon Keswick, captured by a grainy cell phone camera from across the street, was just the start. Local activists began tracking odd patterns: late-night deliveries to old university-owned buildings, rapid shifts in faculty contracts, secretive off-site gatherings with PR advisors, and unnamed legal teams. It wasn't about survival for Harrow anymore. It was about vengeance. Inside the dim warehouse on the edge of town, Harrow sat across from Brandon and a third man, an ex-adjunct professor let go years ago for curriculum non-compliance, now working as a rogue strategist for disgraced faculty. Maps of the campus, faculty schedules, and donor lists were spread across a makeshift table.
They made me the villain,
Harrow whispered, tapping the printout of a protest photo. But I'm the one who built this place. I brought in millions. I published the math that got us ranked. And now they cheer for him. The third man leaned in. So we take back the story. Brandon swallowed hard. How? Discredit the protest. Break the unity. Turn Noah into what they fear. An angry radical. Leak something that spins him into extremism. Brandon hesitated. But there's nothing. He's clean. Harrow smiled grimly. Then we fabricate. Back on campus, Noah could feel the shift again. Not in cheers, but in glances. A whisper campaign was brewing. Flyers began appearing on dining hall tables. Was Noah Darnell radicalized? Accompanied by fake chat logs, distorted quotes, and AI-altered screenshots painting him as part of a covert academic insurrection movement. The lies were ugly. But worse, they were effective. Some students previously neutral now looked at him differently. Faculty stopped offering nods of solidarity. Even journalists grew cautious, wondering if they had missed the full story. Noah sat with Elena in a near-empty cafe, a silence hanging between them like fog. They're poisoning the well, she said, finally, slowly, strategically. They don't need to prove it. They just need to create doubt. Noah stared at the latest flyer in his hand. the font bold and sinister. Extremism has no place at Belmont. They're trying to make me a symbol again, he whispered, but this time, a threat instead of a breakthrough. Dr. Green called that night. Her voice was firm. It's escalation, Noah. They're cornered, and when power feels threatened, it gets desperate. We've seen it before in history in academia. You need to be ready. For what? He asked quietly. For the next strike. The very next morning, a news anchor on national television opened a special report. Shocking new developments at Belmont University. As a student whistleblower reveals deeper links between faculty sabotage, donor corruption, and years of grade tampering. And then, a new twist. In an exclusive, we've learned that Harrow and a network of faculty allies used donor money to fund a parallel admissions pipeline, admitting students based not on merit, but loyalty. Names flashed across the screen. Brandon's was among them, alongside spreadsheet proofs, video meetings, payment trails. The blowback was instant. Brandon's father, a major donor, withdrew from Belmont's board. Students began demanding not just Harrow's removal, but full legal action. It no longer felt like an academic controversy. It was a scandal of institutional collapse. Noah, caught in the center, now realized the scale had expanded beyond him. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was a mirror for every elite institution, clinging to its unearned moral superiority. That night, Noah received one more encrypted file. This one wasn't from an ally, but from inside the donor network. A message read, "We warned you, stop now, or next time, it won't be your scholarship we erase." Attached was a photo. His mother's old house, the one she died in, now tagged in red paint. Silence is survival. The war Noah thought he was winning shifted overnight. It began with a headline, not from a reputable outlet, not from the academic press, but from a shadowy news blog, with a history of promoting conspiracy theories about affirmative action. The article dropped it tarred in bold, inflammatory text. Calculus conspiracy? Whistleblower claims Belmont student fabricated research using dead mother's work. By dawn it had been picked up by 3 right-wing aggregator sites. By noon it was trending. The story was slick, laced with enough distortion to feel plausible, but enough venom to provoke outrage. The anonymous source claimed to be a former Belmont staffer, who alleged that Noah had intentionally altered mathematical proofs in his mother's old journals to match known theorems. The claim painted him not just as a plagiarist, but as someone exploiting grief for personal gain. It was a calculated hit. The smear campaign spread like black ink through water. Conservative commentators pounced. One anchor on a national network leaned into the camera and asked, "Was this just another example of diversity over merit?" On social media the storm turned savage. Hashtags like Dick Math, Mothergate, and affirmative fraud exploded. People who had never stepped into a calculus class suddenly had opinions about complex derivatives, claiming Noah's work was mathematically suspicious, not because they understood it, but because they wanted to believe it was stolen. Then came the real blow. MIT, under pressure from public scrutiny and internal review boards, announced a temporary pause on Noah's scholarship transfer. The statement was clinical, pending further verification of authorship and academic originality. It didn't accuse him. But it didn't protect him either. In a single breath, the ladder he'd been climbing was pulled away, leaving him suspended in freefall. Nowhere to land, nowhere to breathe. Elena found him in the dorm common room, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. "They're freezing the offer," he whispered. "They're freezing everything." She tried to steady him, but he pulled away, clutching his chest. A slow collapse. His breath caught mid-sentence. Panic roared through his lungs like a fire alarm. He hit the floor before she could catch him. An ambulance was called. Paramedics lifted him from cold tile as other students watched, stunned and silent. One whispered, "That's the guy from the protest, right?" At the hospital, they diagnosed it as a severe panic attack triggered by acute emotional stress. He stayed overnight for monitoring. Dr. Green called from Boston and spoke with the hospital staff. Elena never left his side. As Noah lay in that sterile bed, the ceiling above him seemed to blur white, sharp, and unforgiving. His mind kept replaying the worst lines from the article. Exploiting a dead mother's legacy, proof no better than a polished lie. He had faced racism, sabotage, humiliation, even death threats. But this felt different. This was an attack on his soul, a rewriting of his intentions. If they could make the world believe he faked his mother's work, then they could destroy the only reason he'd fought so hard in the first place. They weren't just trying to expel him. They were trying to erase his mother's dream. By morning, Noah was discharged, but his reputation was bleeding. His inbox flooded with hate, death threats, messages like, "Your mom would be ashamed." Others from donors telling MIT to drop the woke fraud. Noah sat at his desk, eyes blank, watching the cursor blink on an unsent email to MIT. He typed, deleted, typed again, stopped. Elena walked in holding something that changed everything. "Come with me," she said, her voice low, and in her hand was a flash drive, with a name scrawled in black marker. BK draft. Final. Elena didn't speak as she led Noah out of the dorm. She walked fast, purposeful, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to follow. They slipped into a quiet study room on the lower floor of the library, the same one where they had found the early evidence of Belmont's hidden system. Tonight, the shadows felt heavier. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to pulse with warning. She shut the door, dropped her backpack on the table, and pulled out the flash drive again. "This," she said softly, "is how they tried to break you." Noah stared at the label. BK. Brandon Keswick. His stomach tightened. Elena plugged the drive into her laptop. A folder opened automatically. Dozens of files, drafts, half-finished sentences, and metadata logs. "This was on Brandon's laptop," she explained. "He left it in the media lab. I recognized the folder icon because he used the same one during freshman orientation. I thought it was just notes or homework." She clicked a file titled Mother Theory Exposé Draft V4. Noah leaned closer. His breath caught. Inside the document was the full original draft of the false accusation published online. Same paragraphs, same claims, same fabricated quotes. But here in this early version were all the rough edits, typos, crossed out lines, notes in the margin. Notes like, "We need to make him look desperate. Maybe claim he added pages after she died. Find angle on SAT scores. Right-wing blogs love that. Use emotional manipulation. Say he's using grief for profit. Harrow said we need to hit him hard so MIT backs off." Noah felt his vision blur, but not from tears, from rage tightening his skull. "How long?" he whispered. 3 weeks, Elena replied. "They've been planning it since the moment your presentation was accepted." She opened another file. Metadata showed creation dates, timestamps, IP addresses, all tied to Brandon's personal login. But the most damning document was one email draft addressed to Harrow. "I finished the smear piece. Should we release it anonymously, or through Patriot Voice? Also added the dead mom journal forgery angle you suggested. That'll stick." Noah's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The lies weren't spontaneous. They weren't misunderstandings. They weren't even Harrow acting alone. It was a coordinated strike. A weapon built in the dark. "And there's more," Elena said, pulling up a folder titled Strategy. Neutralized Darnell. Inside were screenshots of group chats between Harrow, Brandon, and 2 other unnamed legacy students. Planning how to spread the fake story to conservative media, how to manipulate screenshots, how to pressure MIT donors to question Noah's credibility, and how to create momentum of doubt using curated timelines. One line written by Harrow at 1:43 a.m. sliced through Noah's chest like a blade. "Truth doesn't matter. Optics do. Once we poison the well, it won't matter if he proves anything. He'll drown in suspicion." Elena exhaled shakily. "Noah, this is nuclear. They didn't just come for your reputation. They came for your history. Your mother." The weight of her words pressed into him, cold and suffocating. He saw flashes from the hospital, waking up breathless. A stranger's hand adjusting wires on his chest. He remembered feeling small, suffocated, convinced he'd failed the one person he promised to honor. But now he saw the truth. His collapse wasn't evidence of weakness. It was evidence of the violence he'd been subjected to. A violence disguised in emails, documents, and whispered strategies. A violence that left no bruises, only scars. He stood slowly, gripping the table for balance. "We exposed this," he said, voice trembling but fierce. "All of it." Elena nodded. "I'm with you," but her fingers shook slightly. "There's something else." She pulled up one final file, a video recording Brandon had saved onto the same flash drive. The thumbnail showed Harrow, pacing in a dim room, leaning toward the camera. Elena hit play. Harrow's voice filled the study room. Cold, deliberate. "Once this smear hits the right channels, he's done. MIT will freeze him. Belmont will drop him. Then we tighten the noose. This is bigger than him. This is about keeping people like him out." He stopped, leaned closer, his face filling the frame. "Make sure the draft reads like it came from someone who knew his mother. Pain sells. Use." The recording ended. Silence suffocated the room. Noah sank into a chair, hands covering his face. not in fear, but in disbelief at the cruelty, the precision, the coldness of men who saw themselves as gatekeepers. Elena closed the laptop. "This isn't academic sabotage anymore," she whispered. "It's character assassination built on racism." And they came close to winning. Noah lowered his hands. His face wasn't broken. It was resolute, carved by fire, steadied by purpose. "Not anymore," he said. "Now we turn their weapon against them." Just then a notification pinged on Elena's laptop. An email. Anonymous sender. Subject line: "You're looking in the right place, but you don't know the whole truth yet." Attached was a folder labeled BK deleted files recovered. Elena clicked it open, breath hitching. Inside was a document titled Operation M. Darnell. Final. She double-clicked. At the top of the page, in bold font, was a line that froze both of them. "This plan is funded and approved by senior donor partners. If necessary, eliminate the source." And beneath it, the signature, BK. The invitation came just 2 days after the second leak. A respected national news program, Truthline Tonight, reached out to Noah and Elena, requesting an exclusive sit-down to unpack the entire scandal. The show was known for tackling institutional abuse and racial injustice, with millions of primetime viewers, and a reputation for exposing what others buried. At first, Noah hesitated. His body still trembled from the fallout. But when he saw the attachment, a dossier of every piece of evidence compiled by the show's producers, he knew this was no ambush. It was the moment to flip the script. The producers promised control, respect, and full transparency. Noah would not be cross-examined. He'd be heard. They flew to New York under quiet arrangements. Escorted through back entrances, security teams briefed on online threats. Inside the cold steel and glass building of the network, Noah and Elena sat in the green room, hearts racing. Elena clutched a copy of the flash drive. Noah held his mother's journal. "This is it," he whispered. The lights were blinding when the segment began. Across from them sat Marin Bell, the anchor known for her piercing questions and refusal to let power off the hook. Her voice opened the segment with slow cinematic narration. "In tonight's special report," she began, "we unravel the story of a university scandal, one that began with a calculus equation and grew into a national debate about race, merit, and manipulation." The screen behind her filled with clips, the viral video of Noah at the board, the protest crowds, the leaked emails, the hospital footage. Then, silence. She turned to Noah. "Noah Darnell, you've been called a fraud, a radical, and a genius. You've been praised and attacked. But tonight we're walking through the entire timeline. Together." He nodded. They started from the beginning. Harrow's humiliation. The classroom laughs. The doctored video. Each phase laid out like dominoes. Elena presented the internal emails. The audience in studio and at home watched in shock as the quota list spreadsheets appeared on screen. Then came the turning point. Marin Bell leaned forward. "Brandon Keswick, the student who first recorded that video, we invited him here tonight, and he accepted." Gasps in the audience. The camera panned to a separate table. Brandon sat there, paler than usual. A lawyer beside him. The same smug smirk from his campus days was gone. In its place, calculation, caution, maybe even fear. Marin continued. "What we are about to present includes documents found on Mr. Keswick's laptop, fabricated smear drafts, email exchanges with Professor Harrow, and a video that appears to confirm intent to sabotage." She turned to Brandon. "You've seen these files. Do you deny authorship?" Brandon's lawyer leaned in. "My client has no comment." Elena calmly reached for a printed page. "Then let's read one line together." She held up the email. "Dead mom angle will kill him online. Run it through Patriot Voice. Keep our names out." Brandon's jaw twitched. Marin raised her eyebrows. "That's your draft, your device, your metadata," Brandon's lawyer whispered urgently. Noah remained silent. He didn't need to attack. The truth was doing it for him. The tension on set became suffocating. Finally, Brandon broke. He cleared his throat, looked at Marin, then briefly at Noah. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered. "It was supposed to just create doubt. That's all Harrow said. Doubt. Just enough to slow things down." "And the forged evidence?" Marin asked. Brandon's voice dropped. "We made it. Harrow wanted him to crack. Said, if we got MIT to hesitate, it would collapse everything." Gasps echoed again. Even the production crew looked stunned. Marin turned to the camera. "And there it is. On live television, Brandon Keswick admits to fabricating false accusations to derail the academic future of a black student, under the direction of a tenured professor. The silence that followed Brandon's confession was deafening. The studio remained still, not out of politeness, but shock. The betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It had a name, a face, a voice. Viewers across the country weren't just watching a scandal unfold. They were witnessing its architects crumble in real time. Noah sat upright. For the first time in weeks, the weight on his chest lightened. Not fully, but enough to breathe. Marin Bell turned back to the screen behind them. "We reached out to Belmont University for comment," she announced. And minutes before airtime, they sent She tapped her earpiece. A pre-recorded video began to play. It featured Belmont's interim president. Not the one who had stayed silent during the chaos, but a newly appointed leader brought in to manage the crisis. Her voice was calm, measured, but laced with guilt. "To our students, faculty, and the nation," she began. "We deeply regret the events that have come to light. We failed to protect academic integrity. We failed to protect Noah Darnell. And we failed to uphold the values we claim to represent." Then came the line that made Elena grab Noah's hand. "Effective immediately, Professor Emmett Harrow has been terminated from his position, stripped of all titles, and referred to an independent ethics committee. The students and faculty involved in the smear campaign will face disciplinary review." The screen faded to black. The studio audience broke into applause, not the kind meant for performance, but release. Vindication. A rare moment of justice delivered in real time. Marin turned to Noah. "How do you feel hearing that?" He swallowed hard. "It's not just about me," he said. "It's about every student who didn't get this platform. Every voice that was silenced before mine. This was never just a grade dispute. It was a system, and it cracked." Elena added quietly, "And we're not done." As the segment neared its end, Marin looked directly into the camera. "This is more than a college controversy. It's a blueprint for how systems protect themselves, until someone refuses to be erased." She paused, then smiled gently. "Before we go, Noah, we have one more message. It just came through." A producer handed her a card. Marin read aloud. "A major technology and research company, Catalyst Dynamics, has just announced they are offering Noah Darnell a full research grant in his mother's name. The grant includes funding, mentorship, and a public archive to honor underrepresented mathematicians across American history." Noah froze. Marin continued. "They wrote, and I quote, 'Noah Darnell represents not just brilliance, but the resilience of generations silenced. We are proud to honor his mother's legacy by ensuring her work lives on, through him and beyond.'" The studio erupted again. Applause, emotion, stunned gasps. Noah's throat tightened. He blinked hard, biting down the wave rising behind his eyes. For months he had fought a machine that didn't even acknowledge his humanity. He'd been smeared, broken, nearly erased. And now, someone saw him, truly saw him. Not as a pawn or a protest or a statistic, but as a mathematician, a son, a story that mattered. Elena squeezed his hand again. He nodded. Marin leaned back with a smile. "We thank you both for your courage, and for reminding us that sometimes, the truth doesn't just survive, it wins." The lights dimmed, cameras powered down. Crew members rushed forward with hugs, tears, congratulations. Security guided them out a back exit, past a line